Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hue virtual chat. Well, we're going to get snow today, so my background is a little deceiving. The trees are bare, the skies are gray, and yes, the white stuff is about to come today. So not only is it depressing, it's a little bit gloomy. And I just wanted to know if you knew the meaning of FUD or FUD, or it's an acronym for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So just wondering if you ever have suffered or had the feelings of FUD lately, and what do you do to get out of it? But today we'll be talking mostly about the growing concern about racism and how it can affect our mental health and, well, probably lead to some FUD in us. So let's open the doors to our amazing crew that have joined us here for our virtual chat. And there they are. Hey, there's Marli. Hey, hi, Robin. Hey, hi, Eileen, and welcome, Ian. Must be Ian. And I think Keiko is in the conversation. Keiko, hello. Hello. So I just want to let you know that you just have to unmute yourselves and join in the conversation, and then we'll be all set to go. Hi, Marli. So I want to say, first of all, thank you on this great first snow day, I guess we're going to get. We're all anticipating for that. So we were racing around this morning, getting all of the patio furniture indoors and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, so I want to welcome back Eileen. It's so great to see you. And Ian, so you're one of the, well, I'd say maybe the third guy now that's been on this chat. So
thank you so much for having me on.
Okay, and hi, Keiko. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, glad to be here.
Oh, wow. You know, this is the new normal of talk shows or whatever you want to call it. And of course, Robin. Hey, Robin, how was your concert last night? Your curbside concert?
Oh my God, like Romy blew it out of the park, far exceeded my expectations. If anyone has any inclination, like go curbside concerts, there are no words to describe how phenomenal it was.
Oh, I'm glad. So Romy is the producer and organizer of curbside concerts. So they have all these musicians that will come to your place and perform for you on your driveway, in your yard, socially distanced. I think you can only have 5 people now, but hey, at least it's
plus the household. So yeah, but Charlotte was so blown away. She's booked one for Saturday. So get in before it gets too cold, guys.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So anyways, I'm going to start with Eileen and Ian. First of all, we're having this conversation. And again, Rita from Mood Disorders Association of Manitoba was supposed to join us, but unfortunately she couldn't today. So, you know, hopefully we'll have her on. But Eileen and Ian, maybe sort of preface a little bit about the organization and what it does. And then I'm really interested in maybe Ian's kind of expertise and knowledge on how we're discussing racism, we're discussing mental health within our ethnic communities, and especially the Asian community. You know, we're in code orange, close to being code red. So it's scary times for all of us, I think. But Eileen and Ian, take it away.
Yeah, for sure. So we're both from Mood Disorders Association of Manitoba. We both started in July and are loving it here. Mood Disorders Association of Manitoba is a self-based, self-help-based organization dedicated to providing support and advocacy for those struggling with mental illness and co-occurring mental illnesses as well. And so here we have a lot of peer support groups that we offer. We're in the middle of shifting everything online right now, but we do have quite a few support groups that are online through our website that the public can access. We have a mixed peer support group, we have depression group, a youth group, borderline personality disorder group. We had just started our women's group, and we also have the friendly caller program that Ian was captaining, and I'll let him speak about that.
For sure, and that's just a program where actually Manitobans, especially those who are feeling, extra isolation or feelings of loneliness, which are being exacerbated by COVID, will actually reach out and call you and do a mental health check-in on you, and just keep you company, have a friendly call, just like what's in the name. Yeah, and we're, like Eileen said, we're doing some great things here with the organization and really loving it. And then back to your question, I'm obviously a Filipino Canadian. So my mom is a Filipina, I should say. And so I was raised, in a very white neighborhood for most of my life. And so I've personally experienced not just, the mental illnesses side, but also the side of racism and seeing how those two are connected. And there are studies that show, there are ties between racism and anxiety levels, stress levels. Of course, there's great strong ties between socioeconomic factors and race, and then between socioeconomic factors and mental health. So, these are all things that we try to bear in mind while we reach out to the community. And, we always address things with an open community framework, and try to address racism within our own community. And, we're having this conversation shortly after, I think it's important to note the death of Joyce Echequan, who was the 37-year-old Indigenous woman in Quebec who passed away due to not being provided adequate health treatment. And, that was due to racism in the health system. So I think it's just as important for us dealing with mental health to make sure that we are providing adequate services and, making sure that we're addressing racism within our community internally.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's a whole big conversation. Keiko, I wanted to ask you now, you've been doing a lot of work for human rights, especially with the Japanese community too as well. How has this all affected the Japanese community, COVID, pandemic, isolation, economically too, within and the Japanese community is small here in Winnipeg.
Yes, I have been working actually with the national organization, the National Association of Japanese Canadians, the past 2 years, and the last 6-7 months now. I've just gone off the board, but it was quite busy and very emotional and difficult time, I think, for everyone, of course, but also just dealing with some of the reports that have come through the communities. And I think it was good that we did sort of join a coalition of Asian Canadians across the country. And I think you need to support one another in these times when there are issues that come up like this, and to deal with it not only at the local level, but also on a level where you make some changes to policy. And I think that's where they're going now with this coalition, Act to End Racism. I don't know whether you've all heard of that group or not, but it started out of Calgary, and it includes it started with East Asians, mainly because of the COVID, related incidents of stigmatization and xenophobia and of course racism, blatant racism. A lot of it, it wasn't just aggression. Well, it's aggression really. So I think by joining a group like that, you could do more, in terms of making the difference and reaching out to people, because there are a lot of, it includes Filipino, all the other groups now. And now with what happened in the Black community, the anti-Black racism that emerged while we were sitting at home and witnessing all the trauma that was happening, I think, they're also looking at all racism and trying to make changes in the community.
Oh,
But in
I know.
terms of our own community, I'm sorry, I think I didn't answer the question about locally. I think, we're a very small community. We're only about 1,800. And so people are so close and they know each other, like the families. So initially we did reach out to the seniors in the community, make sure that they were being looked after. And now I think we're coming out of it fairly well, but it's still closed. As soon as the first case of COVID arrived in Winnipeg, the cultural center closed, so people didn't have that connection. But thank goodness for conversations like this on Zoom, that they have been having meetings and carrying on, and I think they're doing okay.
Oh, well, that's good. Thanks for joining. Hi, Susie. It's good to see you too. I'm gonna switch it over.
Wow, sorry.
That's okay. You're here. That's all that matters. We're talking all things Asian.
Well, then I'm in the right place.
Yeah. Oh, Robin, one of these things just doesn't belong here. No, what wasn't started with you?
Everybody's Asian when it comes to food.
Like, like I may as well be in the minority for a change. Get over my, ability to think I'm all to everyone. I'll just sit quietly here like this.
No, your turn to speak. Spilling off a little bit about, Eileen and Ian and the work that they do. Obviously, too, it's very similar to the work that you do and Charlotte do. But I really wanted to kind of address the ethnic community, and I am safe to say, because I live it too, is that for Asians we really don't talk about mental health and mental illness. Culturally, it's just something we don't. But now, obviously, living in these times and having a vocal cousin and family member like Marli, I mean, she has opened up all of our ears to so many things. But Robin and Charlotte, Charlotte, you deal with the families too. Is it harder, do you find, for Asians to kind of come forth with their mental well-being?
So I think I learned a good lesson a number of years ago. I was doing some work in Toronto with, God, I forget their name. I think it's like Southeast Asian Coalition. And there was a whole discussion about how do we engage cultures who have some of that shame piece attached to the term mental illness. And that's part of the reason why we're like throwing out mental illness and talking about mental health on a continuum. And one of the conversations was to engage people in volunteering, because people were saying volunteering's an honor kind of thing. And when people were volunteering in some of the mental health, like the peer services, they were getting support. And then like they were being able to talk to their families about their volunteering piece. And it just changed the conversation. And I think people started to be able to have a little bit of a different conversation. And again, that piece about throwing out that really old, I'm so tired of hearing that mental illness. And let's talk mental health. We talk physical health, mental health. Mental health's on such a continuum for me, from the, like, my health is great, yo, to, oh, the wheels have fallen off the bus today, and like the bus feels like it's driving over the cliff. And so I think changing that conversation, throwing out, and Charlotte and I often talk about this. I talk about, let's talk about individuals, let's not talk diagnosis, and let's find out what's happening for someone. Because even if someone has anxiety or depression or bipolar, which, I have that great diagnosis, but it looks really different for every people. There's a few similarities, but let's actually get to know the individual. And if we can do that, like what's working, what's not working for you, they're different conversations. And I think from working with, there's a group in California I've done some work with too, I mean, in terms of the Asian community, and they're changing those discussions, and it's a little bit easier to have that, because if we're just talking mental health as in like the whole continuum, it's not what people are telling me, because look at this face, I don't know, but people are telling me it opens up that conversation a little easier, but it's still, there's so much stigma and discrimination that runs with that, and from what people tell me, it's that big shame piece. But I'm up for you guys to teach me. I'm like just chatting from what I know, which is not a lot.
One of the things that I was thinking about in the last few weeks was language barrier. So, when you talk about the shame and the, that feeling of shame, well, if we have all these services in English, we don't have services in their language, then that shame is even, surmounted, right? So I was actually just thinking about your program, the check-in, the call, given that we're having this discussion of the Asian community, and has there been any sort of discussion about language barrier or marketing to people who speak other languages to be a volunteer for those programs? That's kind of what's been rumbling around in my head, because I was just putting in touch, actually, the reason why, because I was putting in touch a university student with someone who spoke Japanese. And this university student was feeling overwhelmed and feeling anxiety, a lot of anxiety right now, given COVID and university on Zoom, but couldn't translate everything properly for themselves. So that's been one of the issues that's running around in my head right now.
Well, yeah. Eileen and Ian, have you run into those problems?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. That's something that we're actually in the midst of discussing right now, and it's something that we are looking into. There's some organizations, especially those that work in the immigrant and refugee community, some organizations that we're actually in discussion with right now around getting that sort of programming in place, because similarly, we are new to this organization, but that's something that certainly we have seen, and that our executive director Rita Shahal has seen the need for, is trying to implement programs and meeting people where they're at. So if we can get volunteers, from our communities, from the Japanese community and the Filipino community and other Asian communities, and even various African nations and different nations that are bringing newcomers to Canada. We want to get some programming in place that can address that and can reach out and address the needs of those people who require things like, calling and peer support and some of the great things that we're trying to implement.
Yeah. Charlotte, do you want to add in something?
Oh, my head is swirling. I just thinking about what you guys were talking about and the language barriers, and the importance of, well, my head goes a couple places. The sandwich generation, so where you've been raised culturally from your immigrant parents, but you also have all the Canadian, your Canadian upbringings, and trying to appease both your children and the adults in your life can be very difficult. And I've run into that situation many times with parents who have a child who has a child struggling, and trying to keep everybody happy, and that is such a huge balancing act. My head also goes to, we were doing training in Toronto in the fall, and there was some immigrant groups that were part of that, and the importance of having proper training. If you're going to do peer support in that immigrant group, you really need to make sure it is peer support, and because you can do a real disservice, especially when an immigrant comes forward to you trusting that you're going to help them, and you're not giving proper guidance or or whatever that may look like. And yeah, my head goes to that shame piece as well. And I remember several years ago there was a suicide in one of the immigrant communities, that I was working with the parent in that, and it was really difficult supporting the parent because of that shame and blame piece, and then not wanting to talk about it. And then when she started to open up a little bit more with me, and it was through a translator, you know, things were going on for a long time with their child, and then, you know, beating herself up for sticking with her culture and not acknowledging what was really going on with her child. So my heart really was broken over that story, and I'm hoping that what you guys are saying is going to happen for more and more in the immigrant. I know that Toronto has a lot more resources than Winnipeg that I'm aware of. And there's some good stuff out there. So if you're interested in starting something like that, really looking at what's already been created and using that, not thinking that you can create it yourself. So hey, Robin, do you want to add to that? Because we're really big about collaborating. So, you know, when there is something out there and they have it and they're willing to share it with you, go for it. So
I think I just wanted to share like some of the stuff when we're looking at volunteers and training and stuff. Like, I know it's not the same, but I did a bunch of work in Palau, and there's a huge Filipino community, and there's huge Korean community there. And they also speak Palauan, which I don't generally. So we were doing some training there, and one of the things I popped it in the chat, we want to make sure that we adjust all our training too, that we still have our like general trainings, but we also like culturalize the training and look at the languages and the way wording is used. Because the way I say something and the way some of the Palauans said something was completely different. So we had to spend time before we trained those volunteers up about what's the different nuances in the way I describe something versus someone else. And that training was such a cool experience because I did it in English. We had a translator. They did all the activities in Palauan, Filipino, and Korean, which meant I had no idea what they were saying. And then we'd feed back so that I could understand it and the different groups. And I think that was super cool. But we also included individuals and their families in that. So we were getting this like community piece rather than just here's, which, you know, Western society is great. Here's the, you know, individual with the mental health. Let's just look at them. And then other communities have that bigger kind of community piece. So it was like adding that piece to the training as well. So that then we kind of got this instead of this. I'll be quiet now. I'm sorry. It's not my.
No, Robin, keep going on, because what we do a ton now is really looking at that family or community and everybody who's part of the story. So it is just not based on the individual who is struggling, but taking a look at the parents and the grandparents and everybody's role in it and getting everybody together. Robin did an amazing call a couple of weeks ago where she had grandparents and best friends and parents and everybody who was part of the story in on a Zoom call, and then just coming together and working on a plan to support each individual in that, in how they fit into that story. And we're really trying to utilize that more and more going forward. And so something like that in one of the immigrant communities, creating that, so where you're taking a look at their culture and their values and their norms, as well as what's going on by living in our Western culture. And it would be pretty amazing. I know Robin and I would love to develop that one. But anyway,
Okay,
back to you guys.
Let me be on board with that. I'll come and help.
Well, I was just thinking, and Susie, I'll get you in on this, while you were discussing all this, on how, like, all alone, if you could imagine being here for the first time, coming to Canada, coming to Winnipeg, starting a new life, so much promise, so much freedom, and you're in the middle of a pandemic and you're lost. You don't know the language, you don't understand it. And where do you go? And then on the flip side of it, you could have been here for many years and still living in this shell of, you know, whether it be culture or whether it be, you know, trying to appease your parents, your grandparents, and everybody else, but not looking about or thinking about yourself, and still having that cultural difference from everybody else. That could be so unbelievable too in this time. So there's so many different factors. Susie, I don't know. It's hard.
Okay,
You
sorry,
have
I
all
was
the
on mute.
yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite Instagram accounts right now is called Brown Girl Trauma. And it speaks to the parenting and mental health challenges that the children of immigrants have dealt with. And it's from a Southeast Asian perspective, primarily Indian, but there's so much in there that I can relate to. And depending on, you know, I think it depends on how your parents got here, what your family history is, what your story is. But I believe that there are generations of trauma in terms of what we as first generation Canadians deal with. And that has to do with things like colonization, that has to do with things like people having to leave to earn money and send back home. All of those things play a factor. And then you have to take into account as well the racism that your parents faced when they were here too. So their experience was completely different than ours in the sense that I feel a lot of our generation was raised to just shut up and put up, because you don't want to upset the people that brought you here. You don't want to upset the people that live here originally. And so you don't say anything. You don't complain. You just take it. And we were raised, I feel, in this to not do that. We were raised to ask questions and to challenge the status quo and to look at perhaps some of the wrongs that our parents and grandparents may have suffered and go, this isn't right. And no, someone definitely should have stood up for you. And I'm sorry that nobody did, but we're not going to let this happen anymore. So I feel like there's a culmination of a lot of things that younger generations are dealing with and that don't want to put up with what our parents and our grandparents may have experienced already. So there's a lot of appetite for change, a lot of appetite to do better, and a lot of appetite of we're not going to take this anymore. So I think that's great. And I think that having that peer support through the immigrant community is huge, because I feel like that peer support 40 years ago was mostly the shut up and put up scenario where you don't complain, you be grateful that you're even here. Okay, that was the attitude that our parents were given, and that's not right. That's not appropriate. And these people who came before us deserve to be honored, and their stories deserve to be told. And we, as their descendants, deserve to make sure it never happens again.
Boom. Marli.
It's interesting, Susie, your perspective. I would love to hear Keiko's perspective, because Keiko and her husband Art are, you know, close friends to me, and they are my cultural heroes, and they've led the way. So, you know, Keiko, if you wanted to sort of add with Susie because of your background.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that everybody said that, I mean, I was, it's all up here, you know, where you're thinking about all these things. And because of our background, Japanese Canadians were interned and relocated to Manitoba. So there was racism throughout that history, not only in BC, but also when we came to Manitoba. So I was just born basically during the war, so I didn't really experience it as much, but I did experience it growing up. And it was more blatant at the time, I think, you know, just like people would just come up to you and you know, you had to kind of fight. It's a little different now. The aggression is a little more subtle, but at the same time, you've seen incidents of it on TV where people are being pushed or bullied and, you know, called names and so on, because related to COVID because of that Chinese virus that some people were talking about, especially in the United States. But here in Canada too, there were a lot of incidents. And one of the things I wanted to mention was the national organization did have a survey that was put on the website, and it was translated into Japanese. And the Act to End Racism group also put a survey on their website, and they translated it into a lot of different languages so that people could be directed there. And especially Chinese, of course, they had translators for that. They also put up a lot of information on how to deal with, people are fearful, and to tell them to relate an incident, it's traumatic, and they don't, and sometimes, like somebody mentioned about generational, if you've experienced it in the past, chances are you don't want to talk about it, unless you're really opened up, over the years. But I think you tend to just hold back and not want to discuss it. But because we did receive a number of situations, mostly though in Ontario and Vancouver, a lot of incidents there. And so what Act to End Racism did on their website, if people are interested, is they gave little cartoons of situations of if you witness an incident, what to do, how to deal with that, and how to intervene. As because often, when you're a victim, you just kind of get paralyzed. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to say. So it's important for people who witness it to know to take that person aside and protect them. And so those are the kind of things that we've had workshops on throughout these 6 months, and trying to educate people about the resources that are available, and just dealing with some of these things, because people are reluctant to come forward and report these incidents. So it's really about protecting people. And also I just wanted to mention about mental health. When you're watching, even a person who's not involved, when you're watching all these things happen on TV, and you become very sad. You just don't, you don't know what to do, because there's nothing you can do really, because it's happening somewhere else. But I know I really, like, I was working with these situations for months, and then all of a sudden, like, I just felt this sadness and fatigue. Like I wasn't able to sort of do anything anymore, almost, So I think it's important for other people to get involved and to, educate people about what's going on.
Wow. Amazing. Oh, and Keiko, I was just going to ask, just talking about how when you started, you said there's so many thoughts in your mind, and my parents are the same, as like they were interred, came from BC and loaded up on a flat cars, and train stopped, and you go here, you go there, you go here, though, and whatever, and they came and settled here. But I hear little stories, from my dad or from my uncle who has passed now, but I had no idea. And I was just wondering now, and even as Dad watches all of this with Black Lives Matter, all of this violence and racial, racial hate out there, whether that brings back memories too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it definitely does, because a couple of the incident reports that, that we received were from Japanese Canadians who did experience, the whole situation during the 40s. And first of all, they couldn't believe that something was happening to them first. So, you kind of go into denial. You don't want to think that this is still happening. So I think that's probably why, they would rather not discuss it. But I think more and more, like with redress in the 1988, people started to open up and speak about their experiences. And that was really important because otherwise you can't move on. You've always got this feeling of guilt and feeling of, just being hurt and not belonging as a Canadian. That was the feeling that they had. So once that acknowledgement was given, apology by the government that they made a mistake, they just felt a relief that, probably undescribable for people who've never experienced that kind of thing. So we have also been trying to do oral histories because, it's important for people to talk about their experience and so others can, especially us, we're, as Marli pointed out, we're of different generations almost, right? So it's important for our children also to learn about it.
Yes, and we are trying. So Eileen and Ian now, I guess, hearing all of this, and I really, when we were having a conversation with Ian, for me, it triggered a little bit more of a social, economic kind of thing, talking, with the ethnic communities and their mental health and wellness. And, and Eileen too, working with the women's programs, women really do take a lot on, whether they're a family or whether they're here supporting themselves or supporting others. So maybe the two of you now can sort of comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would start off by saying too, there have been studies by the Ontario Human Rights Commission that tie culture as a huge role in how we address and how we identify mental health issues. And then I think that, again, that speaks to, what is a women's place in various cultures. And that's going to change too from culture to culture across our different Asian nations and different Asian ethnicities. There's going to be huge discrepancies in how women are treated and how women identify mental illness in their children, and how much responsibility they have in that role. And so again, just so many thoughts that I've been having throughout this conversation. So many good things that have been said. But there's been also interesting studies that show that Chinese and South Asians in Ontario, this is by Center for Addictions and Mental Health, they presented with a far greater severity of mental illnesses when they were admitted into hospitals. So again, there's this sort of like Asian culture that says to stay hush, stay quiet, and sometimes we're seeing that this is happening until it's far too late, and that's why we're getting Asian members to hospitalize, for mental illnesses when it's at a far, far more severe rate than you would find in other ethnicities and in other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question? I've often wondered with those studies whether, and I've questioned the center about this, whether it's because there's all of the trauma stuff that's occurring for people about moving to new countries, the generational trauma, all of that, and also whether it's our Western model of diagnosing. Like, I've been pushing that conversation with the center at the moment. Like, is it that people actually have more significant, more severe mental illness, or is it because it's our Western way of describing it that puts it that? And if we looked at traditional healing and traditional ways, would we actually describe it the same way? So, like, I always have that twofold Western model, not identifying trauma, like creates explosion, and then we go, oh, we have higher rates of schizophrenia in people from Asian communities. And I'm like, well, is it? Or is it that we're not actually taking a look at what's happening for people and supporting them differently? Is it because we have a diagnosis discussion? There was at the CMHA conference last year, the chief keynote psychiatrist from around like North America said, let's throw out diagnosis. We're doing this wrong. And so I wonder about that in those statistics. And I've been annoying CAMH for a long time about that.
Well, you raise a good point, a very good point. And I think when you're talking about mental health, right? I mean, it's not like a cancer that this is it and that. It is so different from person to person, and it varies, and it's pretty hard, I think, to put like a formula on something like that. So yes, good on you, Robin.
Yeah, I think
Susie.
oh, sorry.
I was just going to talk about an article that I was reading last week, and Marli, maybe you read this article or heard about it too, and it was talking about Japan's lost generation and how there's this entire generation of people who were supposed to have jobs and like move out of their parents' homes and like start their own lives and this and that, but it never happened. For whatever reason, these jobs dried up, and these people are like in their late 30s and 40s and still living at home. And the one thing that was missing from the article, I felt, was a discussion about mental health, and was a discussion about, is there a gap in terms of what these people were experiencing and the lack of support they may have needed that wasn't there, that could have perhaps had a different outcome. Because a lot of the things that people were talking about were feeling disenfranchised, feeling not important, that their work or their presence even wasn't important. And so when you're living in a society on the other side of the world that doesn't talk about these things like we do, there's huge gaps that occur. And what they said was that, oh, the kids just live at home and we don't talk about it, and it's just like, okay, but that's not really helping, right? So it was an interesting discussion in the sense that, okay, but maybe now we can take a look at what precipitated this type of social and societal occurrence. What happened or didn't happen that this entire generation is considered lost and is not doing what their predecessors did. And obviously there were lots of factors at play. We're talking about post-war Japan, all those technological changes, all those social and cultural changes, so many things, but mental health was completely missing. So that was glaring to me, and it would be interesting to see as we move forward in terms of new discussions, how we can bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Well, I know that a couple years ago, there was a lot of discussion of, there was a community member who committed suicide, and there was a lot of discussion on the fact that, basically our cultural center needed to provide supports for people in the mental wellness area. And that came up at a board meeting, and it was one of those conversations where, as a community center, we don't have the capacity to do those programs. Our community center is there's cultural, history, language, and food. So in Manitoba, I think that's what's missing. Folks move here, and the newcomers don't know where to go, and they've come from a society like Japan, and they get here, they have little kids, like she was my age, and our kids did a little play group together, even like same ages as me. The kids were the same age. It was very similar, except for I was 4th generation, she's 1st generation, so there are 3 generations. That's a huge gap. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's very interesting.
And it's interesting, you could add to that too. So perhaps when the kids enter the school system here, that's a great place to start, is to let the kids know what's available locally and regionally, and say, okay, we have resources for you and, for families. And even at a young age, talking about things like mental wellness can be really beneficial to opening up that conversation and to letting these kids know who live here now, this is a topic that's okay to discuss. And there are people here and resources that can help you, right? And they can take that learning home to their families as well.
And I wonder if there's if that's, you've hit the nail on the head. absolutely. But probably folks in this conversation right now can agree that our system, our school system, and our health system, and our, like, you know, the education, you know, system,
Still
the
not ideal. Yeah.
no one's doing this. The nonprofit organizations are trying to connect with the schools. You have to go through the school division. It's very difficult, especially in Winnipeg 1, to get any, you know, connection there and build community and build on, you know, what you're talking about, but that's really basically building a well and healthy community. And all the players don't talk.
So how do you start that? How do you start that conversation? I mean, we've got two groups here that should be together. And I mean, this is going to be such a major, major health concern as we're moving forward.
Like right now, what I'm seeing with our kids in elementary school, our school division is they still haven't put out information on parent teacher. Well, I figured parent teacher is going to be on Zoom or Team Meet or whatever. Our school division still can't decide. Other school divisions have decided on how, yes, so the school divisions within Winnipeg are not even deciding. So on little things within the schools, little programs, meet the teacher. So then you compound it with parents like myself or yourselves saying, wait a second, we also need to take into consideration the mental health of our students, newcomer mental health, different generational mental health, and in our school system, you know, and how do we bridge that? It's so tricky when the school system is not even, like, the school division can't even decide on parent teacher.
Wow. And I think the teachers are having a hard time too, because there was an article too in the paper about how the teachers they don't know what to do. And one teacher said they don't even know how they're going to manage till Christmas, because it is, I guess, chaos in some schools. And now with COVID, you know, hitting some of the schools and everything like that. So yeah, it's kind of a mess right now.
We were talking about doing some peer support for teachers. At one point we had some calls, and I did, like, we were just going to throw that as an option for teachers, but I spoke to a bunch of teachers in Canada and the US. They went, I don't even have a minute for me. I would love that, but I'm so caught up in this chaos of trying to work out how to teach these kids when the world keeps changing that I can't even, like, one person said, I don't even get 10 minutes to sit and read a book. Like, and to try and find time to do a peer support, which I think would be super valuable, but I can't even find the time. So that's one of the huge struggles when I think about teachers. They're working their asses off, and it's just chaos at a higher level than them. And I'm like, sort you out.
Well, a case in point, a girlfriend of mine, she's a teacher. She's been teaching for over 25 years. And all of a sudden, so the principal wanted to make sure that she stayed in her school. So she got a grade 3 class, and she said, I don't know what to do. She said, I was literally in tears at the end of the day because I didn't know how to relate or whatever to these grade 3ers, because she had been so used to teaching high schoolers and junior high kids for 25 years and completely different subject. Like, so there is definite need for some mental health and wellness and some sort of support for all of these teachers, because I'm sure she's not the only story in that. And, you know, here's where she knows she should be kind of in her golden years and ready to retire and have like a wonderful year or 2 more years left. And now she doesn't know if she'll even make it through the year. So that is sad. But anyways, we can't solve all the problems here. So maybe let's go around the table thinking one positive thing that we could do. Okay, talking about what we were talking today, helping our ethnic communities. and, for mental health and wellness. What are some of the things, whether we volunteer, whether we get the word out, whether we try to start the conversation with different organizations? Hi, Kirsten. So let's start with Eileen and Ian.
Well, definitely, I think one of the things we want to do is continue conversations with various organizations about, trying to see what we can do to get various languages implemented and reach out to communities that way. And certainly, just within our communities, continuing to let one another know what resources are out there. If your grandparent can't speak English, maybe you can help them out and come with them to a peer support, or do the Zoom meeting with them, help set it up for them if they don't know how to set up the Zoom meeting, and make sure that we're still utilizing things like the friendly caller program, and just helping one another out is something that I think is a real takeaway, and just sticking with our communities, making sure that we're spreading the word within our communities, which it's something that's not being done enough. But I think that we all here, we got to keep trying, and this is how things start.
Great. Eileen, she's just nodding. You've been so quiet.
I know, I'm a little bit more quiet today. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, just to reiterate what Ian said, definitely look into, I think that I need to look into more how we can open up our peer support groups, and look at people who are faced in racism and discrimination, and how we can support them, how we can make them a part of the peer support groups, how we can involve them more, how we can reach out to them. So I don't know, there's a lot for me to think about over this conversation. I mean, we've talked with Robin, Priest, and Charlotte a bit, and definitely I think collaboration's very important in the mental health community, and in also combating racism and discrimination. So yeah, as we're both pretty new here, I think I would just like to collaborate more with people in the future and see what their ideas are, what our ideas are, and how we can go forward together to fight this.
Wow. Well, perfect. So we'll definitely keep you in the conversation too as well. Marli?
I had a thought. My thought was more, it's Susie's so good at this kind of thing. What about a social media blast, or connecting with community centers, IRCOM, but all the Filipino community center, the Chinese community center, the Japanese community center, all of our Asian community centers, because we're talking about that, but obviously including everyone, putting a call out for translators, putting a call out for peer-to-peer support volunteers, looking at intergenerational. One of my takeaways from our conversation is an intergenerational connection is really important. So specifying intergenerational need for volunteers, and connecting over social media with all of these different groups, blasting out, putting together a poster, an online poster, obviously, but just blasting it out. It doesn't cost anything. I know there's a Filipino journal, and they would charge you for an ad in the paper, but online, it's something maybe cost effective for your organization. That's all I had to say about that. But I was like, ooh, we should.
I'm sure there's more. Well, that's a very good idea, and it's probably something we could start right now, just even a list of all these organizations and people that we've had on our conversation. So I can think of Immigration Winnipeg too, partners with them too as well. Keiko.
Yeah, I agree too. It's really awareness that you need to circulate, and anything that's already been done by some groups. I don't know whether some of you probably represent various groups, but in Winnipeg, as you mentioned just now, Immigration Partnership Winnipeg. They are part of that coalition that I was speaking about. And also Asian Heritage Society. They have become involved in that. So they recently had a campaign about Speak Up, a mask, a mask campaign. And it was really to get high profile people to bring awareness to some of these, racism, and then to circulate some of those masks to the essential workers. So, when we're talking about mental health, I used to be a former a health care worker, and I'm wondering how they're coping because it's been a long time. And now as we spike up again, they're under all this stress again. So how they're coping. And, I think it's good to have organizations such as yours and to make sure that people are all aware of it. And if you do need translations or whatever as Marli mentioned, maybe speak to some of the local community organizations and get them to translate.
Oh, well, thank you. And Charlotte and Kirsten now?
I just got here.
Not fair, not fair.
What, I was just thinking that, with awareness, my hope is that there will be action as well. So, I mean, it's all said and good if we're just writing about it and posting about it, but actually coming forward and doing it would be great. And then the other part is just that, I'll go back to the shame piece, that if in some cases, if it's family member coming to translate, maybe the person in your family doesn't want you to know what's going on. So being really careful and cautious around that as well, because, if they are willing to come forward and start talking about their mental health, maybe they're just not willing yet to tell their family about it. So no, this is a topic I think, Tracy, that you could come back to because it's big, and maybe the next time we have our action steps in place of what we're going to do, which would be even better. So.
That'd be pretty cool. Susie.
Well, I want to flip the script a little bit and say that it is it's tiring and it's exhausting to have to be the people who are also the victims of racism to be the ones in charge of ending racism. Okay, so that's a difficult thing. And I think that, and this year has been a watershed moment for many of these issues, but there's really one way to combat racism, which is don't be a racist. And that sounds very simple, but that's really what we're looking at here. And to put the work of this monumental task on the shoulders and backs of people who are also the victims of these hateful acts blows my mind. So to everybody out there who, thinks that maybe they have racist tendencies, maybe they harbor some prejudices, you need to examine your behavior and ask yourself why and what kind of harm you're putting out into the world upon others when you exercise those prejudices and racist beliefs and then even strike out with violence. The only way to stop racism is for people to stop being racist. And that's a difficult thing to understand, but it's also the simplest thing because we are not born to hate. We are not born to wreak havoc in this world. We are born to build community. We are born to be there for each other and to hopefully help each other. So when I hear stories from my brothers and sisters in the Asian community, in the Black community, whatever it might be, still suffering this plague, it's exhausting and it makes me mad. So my words today are not, my Pollyanna usual point of view. My words today are stop being racist. It's as simple as that. The problem is not with the victims of racism, it's with you being the person executing those racist acts.
And there you have it. Simple, but so hard to do. You're right, Susie. Totally right. When you kind of spin it around and you look at the other end of the stick, kind of, so to speak. But you're right. This is a big topic. It'd be really interesting to see if we can, I mean, even if you look at the grassroots to start some sort of, communication, conversation, anyways, between organizations and start a movement, and vis-a-vis maybe stopping people from being racist, and then at the same time creating a better mental wellness and health for everyone, not just the Asian or the ethnic communities, but for everyone, because we're all human. We're all the same, just come in different packaging.
And that we have to come back to this one saying that I really just think says so much, is that rights are not like pie. There's enough for everybody. Like, everybody having individual rights does not mean that other people's lose theirs. Everybody deserves a life of respect and dignity, period.
All right. So slice of pie for everybody today. Well said and well put. Lots of things to think about. Thank you so much, Eileen. And thank you, Ian. It was really great to meet you. And nice to meet you, Keiko. We love to have you back on. And maybe we can have Art on, since I had Ian on. So we're kind of breaking the rules a bit. But anyways, yes. And well, we'll see Charlotte and Kirsten early tomorrow morning.
Yes.
And thank you so much, Susie. Always good. And well, not, saving the best for the last, Robin. Thank you so much. All right. Okay. Write down your actions. It's your homework. We'll maybe have this chat again in 2 weeks' time and see where we are. That'll be great. Okay. Have a beautiful day.
Yeah.
Enjoy the snow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.